last one before coffee. Okay. Right, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me, Roland. It's really nice to be here. I don't often get to speak to real people. I normally get locked in a room with financial advisors, so they do exist. They're just not here today. So no, it's really nice. I was very pleased to be asked. And then I got asked to talk about death, and I was like, oh, okay. I always get the cheerful subjects. And I wasn't really aware that other people were going to be talking about death before me as well, so a little bit of my thunder's been stolen. But I promise less doom and gloom than maybe the mood around Tom's slides earlier. You're probably not surprised to know that I can't give you advice. You are all wonderful individual people with different circumstances, different things going in your life, different family arrangements. Yeah, if you're not sure about any of this at the end of it, go and speak to somebody, go and speak to a financial advisor who can look on your particular circumstances. So what am I going to look at then? I'm going to look at the current rules on death benefits, because most of what I'm going to say, despite what you've heard in the budget and what Tom said, and which I will cover a little bit at the end, most of it isn't going to change, isn't planned to change in terms of the basic rules about pension death benefits. So I'm going to look at who can benefit from your pension. I look at the process that pension schemes go through when they decide who gets your pension, any unused funds that you had that are still there in your pension pot when you die, how those decisions are made as to who gets them, what form of benefits that can be paid, so will your beneficiaries, once they've been selected, what they can do with it, basically. I will talk about tax, because death and tax is everybody's favourite subjects. I'll look at the option of leaving your pension to charity or some of your pension to charity, the options around that, and then I will finish off with a bit about what's changing with the inheritance tax changes coming in 2027. So starting off looking at who can benefit from your pension. So if you have in a defined contribution pension scheme such as a SIP, there will normally, unless you've cleared it out in your lifetime, which may happen. You can do that. You can withdraw everything. But if you have unused pension funds on your death, who can benefit from that? Now, in pension rules, there is a definition of a dependent. And a dependent is always going to be eligible to receive your pension benefits. No matter what you have done or said, instructions or otherwise, somebody who's a dependent could potentially benefit from your pension funds on your death. Now, the first couple are fairly obvious. If you are a spouse or civil partner and anyone you're legally married to, they are automatically a dependent. Child under the age of 23, it doesn't matter how independent they are. If you have a 20-year-old child who is the next influencer and has made their first million on TikTok video or whatever the kids do these days, and they are no longer financially dependent on you. You've probably got quite a result there. I think most kids probably are at 20, but yes, they will still be classed as a dependent regardless of their wealth. Older children, mental or physical impairment, they are automatically classed as dependent on you. With the definitions of children, it is only your children. It can't ever be grandchildren. It has to be your child, not missing a generation on that. And then the last two are a little bit more interesting because the first three are fairly obvious and easy to define. If somebody's married, if it's your child or not. Somebody who's financially dependent on you. So that could include an older child. Your 20-year-old might have made their million on TikTok, but your 25-year-old might be unemployed and living at home with no money and still very much dependent on you. They could still be classed as a dependent, but obviously you would need to evidence that, or they would need to evidence it on your death to be classed as a dependent. It's not automatic because it's not automatic by virtue of their age and being your child. In a financial relationships of mutual dependence. So I'm sure some of you, given the number of people we have in this room, some of you in this room are probably living with a long-term partner that you are not married to. You may well be, they could be financially dependent on you. That is quite possible. Or it might be that you're not really financially dependent on each other, not really financially dependent, you on them or them on you, but you have entwined finances. You may have a joint mortgage. You may pay the bills together. But, you're in a long-term relationship and your finances are mixed together. which is what we would define as being mutual dependence. You know, you're in that relationship financially as well as emotionally or whatever else. So they could be classed as a dependent. But again, that's not an automatic thing. You can't just show us a marriage certificate which says that's you're a dependent. This one's a bit harder to define, but it is, you know, these are the rules. They would be eligible. But on your death, if they weren't named, you know, the trustees are likely to need the evidence to support the evidence of that dependency, that these things are going on. Of course, the other option is a nominee. So a nominee is simply somebody that you nominate to receive your pension death benefits. So particularly important when you have those people in those last two categories, if it's a cohabiting partner or, you know, somebody else that's financially dependent on you, by you making them a nominee means it's easier for them when you die because they don't have to necessarily prove their dependence on you. It just makes the process more straightforward. Also means you can obviously nominate people who aren't dependent on you. Most obviously would be adult children. You can nominate them, but it can be, you know, it can be grandchildren, it could be nieces, nephews, cousins, sister-in-laws, business partners, stepchildren, you know, whoever you want, cousins, it's not a limit on it, but you can nominate whether it's your friend who you go drinking with on a pub on a Friday night and you've done that for 20 years, whatever it is, you can nominate whoever you like. And the way that you do that is by sending an expression of wish or a nomination form to your pension provider. So most pension providers will have it, whether it's a paper form or whether they do it online. If you're with AJ Bell, this is what the screen looks like. You can log into your account, you can see your pension beneficiaries, and you can go in there and change that at any time. So on here, it is quite small, but there's a section where you put the name in. You say what their relationship is. On this one, I've selected spouse, so it could be a child, grandchild, godchild, aunts, uncles. It could just be a friend. It could be a business partner. There's a category for other. You know, you put down what the relationship is with you. On there, type is whether they're a person, an individual. You can also nominate trusts as well, or a charity, which we'll talk about. So there is the option to put that in there. And it doesn't just have to be to one person. Okay, on here it says 100%. As long as it adds up to 100%, you can split it between however many people that you like on there. So if you want to give 50% to your spouse and 25% each to your two children, or you know, put 10% for a couple of grandchildren in there, whatever, as long as it adds up to 100%, and it could be some to a trust and some to a charity and some to family members or friends. You can do that on there. And as I say, it makes life a lot easier the more up-to-date this is. We have a lot of people that will make a nomination. It asks you to do this when you set up your pension, and the same, I think, with most pension providers. It will ask you to do it when you set up, and we might send a reminder when you start accessing your pension benefits. But you can go in and change it at any time and update it. Not everybody does that, though. Some people will set up their pension and then just forget about it. So, for that reason, pension trustees have discretion. Most defined contribution pension schemes, so like SIPs, the vast majority of them, the trustees will have discretion when it comes to death benefits, which means what you write on your nomination isn't legally binding. The trustees do not have to follow it. Now, you would have to have good reason not to follow it. Most circumstances, if it's straightforward, if you've said 100% to your spouse is still alive when you die, you're going to pay it to the spouse. But by having discretion, it allows us, if your circumstances have changed, to take that into account. So when we decide who is going to get your pension fund on your death, we will look at your nomination form and what you've put down. That's the first thing we will always consider. We will look at relationships. If you said that your spouse is going to get it, but actually you got divorced 5 years ago before you died, and you updated your will and you sorted everything else, but you forgot to change your pension thing, that's quite relevant. It might not be appropriate to pay it to them anymore. They're no longer your spouse, though it says spouse on there. So we would take that into account. You might have a new relationship as well. You might have been single when you filled it in, but now you were cohabiting with somebody when you died and you have a relationship and they are actually a dependent on you now. You may have somebody who's become a dependent since you completed it. We will also look at the will, if there is a will, if you've written a will, we will look at that as well. Now, you can't put in your will what happens to your pension. I have seen wills with it written in there. It doesn't mean anything. It's not legally binding. You cannot control your pension fund with your will. But as trustees, when we're making decision on who is the appropriate beneficiaries, obviously that can give us an indication of, of what your wishes are. So, about relationships. If somebody's been cut out of here, cut out of your will, and you've cut them out of the pension, there's probably a reason for it. Things like that we do look at. And if there's information and there's a clear intent to do it, if it's like an expression of wishes you either sent to your pension provider or a letter of wishes that's gone with the will, which explains why you've done it, that makes the whole process a lot simpler for the trustees when they come to exercising their discretion. Another reason why we might vary it is because you've written 100% spouse, but when you die, your spouse is going, well, actually, I'm financially independent. I've got enough money in my own pension fund. I've got enough to support me for the rest of my life. I'd actually like the kids to have some of it now rather than waiting for my death. And so they might say, well, actually, just pay it 50-50 to the kids. Or they might say, well, I'll keep half of it, but then you give the rest of it to the kids. And we have the discretion, we can vary it. In those circumstances, if you'd written 100% to a spouse or somebody else that's dependent on you, and they said they didn't need it, we would need evidence, we'd basically want confirmation from them that they are financially secure. Because we'd always, we try and consider dependents first, make sure they're financially secure before we'd then divert some of it to the children. But that is something that we could do. Conversely, if you've put 50-50 to your children who are adults and your spouse is still alive, because they are a dependent, trustees have to consider the dependents. But, normally in those circumstances, it would be a simple question to the spouse to say, the nomination, your late spouse has nominated your children, obviously you're a dependent, can you confirm that, you're financially secure and you don't need the money, basically? And if they confirm that, then we would follow the expression of wish. So there is discretion in there. The other advantage at the moment is by having discretion, it means the pension is outside your estate. If you had a binding nomination today, it would put it within your estate. Obviously, that will become a moot point in a couple of years' time. But that's where we are. But there are still good reasons why we need to keep discretion going forward, because you are all engaged people with your investments and your pension, or else you wouldn't be sat in this room right now. But unfortunately, we have lots of customers who are less engaged, who will set up their pension and then forget about it, or certainly forget about the nominations, and they do get divorced, and they do have children, and they have new relationships, and they don't update it. And there are some where it's just really not appropriate to follow what they put in there 15 years ago. Or they've just nominated one person, and that person's passed away before them, and so it's not on there. So there are reasons why we need to have that discretion in there. But really, my message is, keep it up. The more up to date you keep it, the less likely we are to need to vary it. On that. Okay, so once the trustees have exercised their discretion as to who can receive the death benefits, then I'm going to look at, what are the options available. So as long as it's either going to a dependent or somebody that you've nominated, they can choose whether they want to take the whole lot out as a lump sum and go and have a big party to celebrate your life, or do whatever they want to do with it. They can move it to a pension in their own name, and then they can just take income from that whenever they want. So they can have what's called a beneficiaries flexi access drawdown. Put it in their own, take it out. So they can leave it in the tax wrapper, in the pension, the tax wrapper with all its tax advantages, and just take income as and when they need it. There's no time limit on that. Alternatively, I should have put it on here, they can use it to buy an annuity as well, if they wanted to. If they wanted a secure income, they can also do that with it. They can do a combination of things as well. They don't have to pick one or the other. They could take a lump sum, put some in drawdown, buy an annuity with the other bit of it if they really wanted to. It's probably unusual to do all three, but that is possible. It is allowed within the rules on that. As I said, you can have multiple beneficiaries. So each beneficiary, once it's been decided that they get a share of your unused pension, they choose what they do with it. So you can't control, you can't say, I want this to go to my child, but I want them to already take an income from it. You don't have that control. Basically, once you're saying they can have it, they decide what they do with it. We can also pay lump sums to beneficiaries that aren't individuals, so to a trust or to a charity. So you can't have a regular income going to those, but it would just be the lump sum payment of your unused pension pot, which would go directly to them. Beneficiaries drawdown then, so if they do take the unused funds on your death, and they can put it into a pension scheme in their own name. They can take income at any age, so it's none of this, you've got to be 55 to access your pension. If it's as a beneficiary, they can take it at any time. So, if you've got, say, potentially, could be grandchildren could have it. If it's only under 18s, their parents or legal guardian would look after the pension and manage it until they hit 18 and manage withdrawals. So they can make withdrawals, and the obvious thing for under 18s might be to pay for school fees, which, as we all know, are going up from January. On that, beneficiaries' pot is always separate to any pot that the beneficiary has in their own right. So you might have a member's drawdown pot and a beneficiary's drawdown pot. You can have it in one SIP, they're just kept separately. But taking income as a beneficiary doesn't impact your ability to pay into your own pension in the same way that if you access your own pension, you can then be restricted. It's different on that. Tax treatment then, I only realised I need to talk a bit faster. So if you die before the age of 75, it's normally tax-free. If your beneficiaries take it as income, then it is tax-free as long as it's put into their name within 2 years of your death. Over 75, they pay income tax. Before age 75, if they decide to take it out as a lump sum, there is a limit. The lump sum death benefit allowance is just over £1 million, less whatever tax-free cash you've had in your name. But to be honest, if they've got the option of taking it as an income, you can just put it into income and then take it out as an unlimited lump sum in one payment anyway. Charity. So there are very specific rules on charity lump sum death benefits. Now, you can only do what is defined as a charity lump sum death benefit if you have no dependents. So if you're in a married couple, it would be on second death. And it has to be a charity nominated by you in your lifetime rather than your beneficiaries when you die. If it meets those conditions, it can be paid completely tax-free, with no limit on it at all on that one. You can make other payments to charity that don't meet that conditions, most commonly if you still had a dependent, but it would become under the normal rules for taxation. Whereas this one, if it meets these criteria, it's exempt from tax. Right, last little bit, pensions and IHT. So, touched on this already, Tom's talked about it a little bit. We know there's changes that are proposed to come in. Ooh, my watch is talking to me for some reason. So, from April 2027, the pensions are going to be included in the estate. That is the proposal that is come from the lovely Rachel Reeves, who you all loved and met with such warmth when you saw her face earlier. As Tom's touched on already, spousal exemption applies, so really important on that. So if you are married and you're leaving it to your husband or wife, or in a civil partnership to your partner, then you don't have to worry about this. You don't have to worry about this until second death. And I'll just reiterate the point. If you're not married already, you've been living with somebody for 10 years, here's a really romantic reason to get married. On that. The details of this are still under consultation, so we don't have the final rules on exactly how this is going to work. The consultation that came out on the day of the budget closes on the 22nd of January. There will then be some draft legislation after that. There'll be some more consultation, and then, we've still got another 2 years to go on this. So we don't know exactly how it's going to work. We do think there will be changes from what they've proposed, so I'm not going to tell you exactly how they propose it to work because I really don't think that's what's going to happen, so I don't think there's much point. I think we will have inheritance tax on pensions in a couple of years' time, but the details, it's not worth going into. The main principle, though, is that IHT would be taken first. So you'd look at your personal representatives, your executors would look at the size of your estate and they include the pension in that. Whatever nil rate band you have is available, you can use that. It will be split proportionately between the estate and the pension fund, and then the bit above that in your pension will be subject to inheritance tax if it's not going to your spouse. That would be deducted first, And then after that, the normal tax rules that I've explained would apply, as in if you die under 75, there would be no income tax. If it was over 75, you would then have income tax after the IHT has been taken. Yes, I think I just said that bit. 5 seconds left. So yeah, you can nominate whoever you want. So it's not restricted to family members. Beneficiaries choose the form of benefits, how they take it. That's not in your control. Please keep your nominations up to date. It makes everything easier for us as trustees and obviously for your beneficiaries as well, your potential beneficiaries, your family members, loved ones, to deal with it. It makes it much more straightforward. IHT changes, they're not for a couple of years. As Tom said earlier, I reiterate, don't panic just yet on that one. But thank you.